Hi, I'm Chris Sepper. I run MedCityNews.com. I am here again for another wonderful edition of MedHeads, which is MedCityNews.com's look at the week it was in healthcare and in the side of innovation in healthcare. Ugh, what a Friday. Anyway, I'm joined by two great people. I'm joined by Megan Akeshavan. She writes about life science innovation at MedCity News. Megan, how are you?
I am Dandy. How are you?
I am fantastic. Also, and this is a Med City first, Med City MedHeads first. We have a special guest on MedHeads, right? This is big. I've been dying to use sound effects for a long time. But we have Mark Zhang, right? Palliative care fellow in the Harvard Medical School Palliative Care Fellowship. He's also going to be a palliative care consultant to Dana-Farber and the first clinical informatics and innovation partner at Partners Health. Like I said to him earlier, he has made 3 groups of parents proud with a title like that. Right? Mark, it's great to join. How are
Thank
you?
you so much for having me. I'm doing great. Sunny Boston, so can't complain.
So Mark's in Boston, Meghna is in San Diego, and I am in beautiful Cleveland, Ohio, the Med City News World Headquarters. We're going to talk this week in depth about the hack in healthcare. Meghna this week, I don't know if you had a chance, anybody, to read it, but I hope you did, wrote extensively about her personal experience going through MIT Hacking Medicine's Grand Hack, right, their granddaddy hack. And so Meghna, we did this. One, we want MedCity journalists want to understand the lives of entrepreneurs so we can be better reporters. So Meghna went for that reason, but she came out of it with a story because I think so many people today, Meghna, are simply fascinated and wonder about the true impact of a hack to transform innovation in healthcare. So talk about why you went, what it was like, and what you learned.
So I went because I have been probably since watching The Social Network, that Facebook movie. I've been curious about the hackathon, and even more curious about how that could apply to healthcare, because there are just so many problems in our healthcare system and not always the most innovative ways to approach them. So I was kind of curious to see what a sort of a multidisciplinary team approach could be to like quickly generating a solution to, or some sort of a solution in healthcare. So I went to the hackathon with Chris's good blessings, and met Mark, and we won some things. So Mark, why did you go to the hackathon?
Yeah, Mark. I mean, it's interesting. We each had our own motivations, and this wasn't your first hack, right? So you've
No.
been in a hack a couple times. What was it? What was the value in it for you?
I think so basically I think that I've always been interested in kind of how technology can make our lives better. Before I even went to healthcare, I remember and I think I told Megan of this when we were at the hackathon, but I remember like distinctly like in high school, like seeing like the first like kid, one of my friends, come in with like a Palm Pilot, and like my mind just being blown, right? Like this, oh my God, we've reached the future. And I think during med school and even during my residency in Pittsburgh, I've been interested in using technology and application development to make clinicians' lives better and also to make patients' lives better. So I wanted to go to the hackathon primarily to meet like-minded people and potentially come up with a great idea, and I think we did that. So yeah, this is actually my second hackathon, Chris. So the first one I did was actually back in November with undergraduate students, and it was an amazing experience. Again, you meet like just some of the most like people that you never meet outside of my personal silo, and you get to talk with fun people and you come up with good ideas. And actually, we won that one too. So this is a repeat.
Well, let me go back to Mark. Actually, I want Mark to answer this. You mentioned not being in their silos, but how many people as you went through medical school? What was the difference in the thinking that happened at the hack than the thinking that happened in medical school? And
Sure.
I mean, are most people not like you who would gravitate toward that? I mean, is there just a different innovation mindset that has to happen?
Yeah, I think medicine as a whole, especially the training, medical education training, and Megan, I'm sure your husband can kind of confirm this, but like the whole training method is very much rote memorization, and kind of, doing. You're a receptacle. You take in all this information because that's what you need to become a doctor, right? But there's also, as you get further along and as you go towards being a practicing physician, there's this critical thinking element, and you're on the ground, right? And you see the problems that are involved, that are in the healthcare system clinically. So I think there's a lot of interest in, when I tell people about there's this thing called hackathons. There's like this way that we can actually try and solve these problems. A lot of clinicians I talk with are just so interested and they want to learn more, and they just didn't know that there are these outlets where you can. So I think there are a lot more like-minded people out there that just don't know that this is like a thing. And some of it, I think, is just because the medical training as a whole is just so based on route memorization, and then you specialize, and then you're kind of in your own world, right? And you're just trying to get through the day, and it's so hard. And by then you probably have a family, and hopefully you have kids, and you hopefully want to keep your family and kids, so you want to try and maintain something of a work-life balance. So it's hard to do these things as well. So what I think was so wonderful about hackathons are that it's 3 days, right? At most, it's 3 days. You do it on a weekend, and you get to meet people outside of your comfort zone, and you could potentially help solve big problems, or at least it's a great critical thinking exercise.
So Meghana, and that was one of the things that really was one of the baselines of the story, right? What the story said, is this something that can transform healthcare? Or is it simply a thing for creatives like Mark to kind of hang out, have a meetup, and go home? In your analysis, Meghana, I mean, you're always writing about startups, right? What's the value of the hack for the bigger picture in healthcare versus, or is it just a great meetup for creative, cool kids in healthcare?
Well, as I said in the story, I really do think that the diversity of our team really did, help refine some of the ideas that we were working on. We each came from different perspectives. I don't think you would easily get that outside of an event where you're kind of forced together or gravitate together. I think that some very real thinking can come out of these very intense bursts of just focus. I think everyone comes in with a certain level of expertise, so you're not going in completely blind. So I don't think it's. I think that the hackathon really has some legit merit, basically, having been in one, and seeing how some of the other teams fared as well. I mean, not every idea seemed like a home run. Hell, our idea didn't necessarily seem like a home run all the time. But even if you don't generate a startup straight out of that, you've got that process. You've got hours and hours of talking and thinking about an idea, and maybe that could lead to something else. So I think that I just think there's real value to these types of events.
Just to play off that a little, the iterative process was so important, and I think there's a lot to learn there. Even if your idea, I mean, we went through so many ideas on that Saturday before and it really was 8 or 9 p.m. when we came up with the idea that we actually ended up using, and I think working through that process with people that don't think like you and come from different perspectives and different fields is so rewarding, and I think that in itself is high value. So yeah, I mean, just I think that even if nothing else, being able to interact with people in that manner, in a creative sense, is awesome. And also, I will agree. You're right, Chris. We were the cool kids at the hackathon, and that might be the reason why we won. I don't know, but I'm just gonna throw it out there.
And walk me through a little bit, Meghana, with the process too. Step by step, what happens at a hack? We kind of jumped ahead and we've talked about its impact, but what's day one, what's day two, and how does it all wind up?
Sure. Well, day one, we all congregated at MIT, not at the Media Lab, but at one of the MIT auditorium type places. We all listened to folks. There were 4 different tracks. There was primary care, there was telehealth, wearables, and global health. So we were basically in, like people tried to entice us to go to the specific tracks that were presented. And after that, if people had specific ideas on what problems they wanted solved, they went up to the front onto a podium and had a 1 minute to pitch their problem. So it could have been end of life care like we did, or it could have been, traffic safety issues. There were all kinds of things that were pitched. And then after that, we were given a couple hours just to network and, find the idea and the group of people that would fit the most. So that was just a Friday night. And then on Saturday, we had it was almost a free-for-all. They were like, okay, go find your teams, create your teams. And we just kind of were left to our own devices, honestly. That there were some mentors circulating around. There was some food. But besides that, it was just a matter of finding your people and finding an idea and just running with it.
And so the bulk of Mark, the bulk of this then is once you kind of speed date and then go through kind of the matching process and come with the idea. It just sounds like you talked about. Now it's hours and hours of both hashing that idea out and then making a presentation. Is that it? And then what's the presentation like?
Well, actually, I would say that actually, I think the first step is really finding people that not only compliment you, but even more importantly, you can tolerate for long periods of time. So that's the first step. So I think even before we came up with the idea, it was really about finding, like Megan said, your tribe, right? And what was really interesting was there were maybe like 20-ish people that were in the kind of the aging and elder care track, and we kind of met, and they were actually all spread from the 4 different tracks. So I was actually in telehealth, and Sue Lin, who is actually one of the big drivers for this idea, and actually my partner now, she was actually in, I believe, primary care. And Megan, where were you? Were you in
also
primary care? Yeah.
I saw Sue Lin pitch, and I was like, I like that girl. I'm gonna follow her.
Yeah. So basically, we were all spread throughout, and it was actually on the second day in the morning when the MIT Hacking Medicine people actually put up like a Google sheet that had all the pitches from all the different things. I can't remember if it was me or Sue Lin or someone, but someone basically trolled it and found everyone that was doing, elder care or something related, and we all got together in a room and basically did introductions for like 20 minutes or so, and then kind of naturally divided. There was a division where half the room wanted to do more software and the other half wanted to do more like hardware solutions. So that was a natural division. And then there were further divisions depending on, ideas and, also probably who you thought you could tolerate. and that's kind of what we did. And when we finally got to our core group, which is, I think, probably like 6 people or so, that's when we really started doing like we had something of an idea, a concept that we wanted to work with end-of-life care in a way to support people and to make it easier. And then that's when the iteration process really started, and the ideas. And like I said, we didn't come up with a final idea until about 9 o'clock at night. So it was a long day.
Actually, Kill Switch was kind of a final idea for a little.
It was an idea. Yeah, it was a final idea.
You can explain Kill Switch to everybody, just for those who didn't get to read that part of the story. Because what I learned now is that the hack is, like you said, hours and hours of iteration, and in there comes some real great ideas, and then there are some fantastically awful ideas, which is Kill Switch, I think.
Which is both. There's something amazing about it. People like that idea. I think there's value for it.
Explain that idea.
Mark, you did such a good job when you came up with it.
No, wait. I want to make sure. I want to just put this out on the table, but I certainly did not come up with this idea.
I just can't remember.
What I did was I just I thought that there was some promise to it, and we went with it. But I was not the founder of the idea. But basically, the idea came from someone in the group mentioned that one of their friends was talking about how, like, who's gonna delete their porn stash when they die. And that got me thinking about, well, what about all the things that could potentially happen, like an if then that kind of thing for if you got sick or if you were to pass. So our idea was Kill Switch, which was this service that you could potentially send the people that you love "I love you," messages via video or text. You can send like the people that you hate, middle fingers, right? You can tell your best friend to delete like your Facebook profile or your Twitter profile, and that it would be like a memorial thing. So we were like really like in that idea for, I would say, at least a couple of hours before actually one of the other people in our group, another Mark, basically said it was a dumb idea, and we took a step back, looked at it, and collectively agreed that yeah, it was a dumb idea, and then we started the process again.
Well, Mark, what was your final? What was the final idea you settled on, and what was the presentation like? And when again, and talk about this for people who may have never been to a hack. Like, and what's your idea, and then what do you have to do to present it, and what's that presentation? 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 12 minutes, and so on.
Yeah. So the final idea was basically, it's called My Proxy, and Chris, are you familiar with what a healthcare proxy is?
Yes, but so tell it to our grandiose audience out there.
Absolutely. So basically, a healthcare proxy is a legal emergency contact. It's someone that would make decisions for you, medical decisions, if you were, for whatever reason, incapacitated and unable to. And ideally, they're not actually making decisions on their own accord. What's happening is this healthcare proxy has actually had a discussion with you and really is just executing the things that you would want in this situation. Like, that's the ideal world, right? But in the real world, in the clinical world that I live in, most people don't actually have healthcare proxies. And it's understandable. It's no one's fault, because it's kind of a hard conversation to have. No one wants to talk about dying or death. I'm a palliative care specialist. That's my wheelhouse, and it's hard for me, right? So our idea is, how do you lower the barriers? How do you make it normal? How do you, because it's so important. And the current solutions now are basically paper-based and kind of crappy. So what we did was we came up with a patient-facing platform called My Proxy. And basically what it is it's very simple, socially connected. It basically asks you in plain English, who would you trust if you were unable to make medical decisions for yourself? And you put in the person that you would trust name and their contact info, and then it sends out like this beautiful plain English email to that person saying, hey, this person decided that you would be the person that they trust to make decisions for them. You're like, if they were unable to. And then what we do is we actually put up primers that say, you guys should really talk. You guys should really talk and figure out what really is important. And that's kind of what our really big idea is. It's this really simple way to engage people into talking about a very difficult, hard conversation. So for me and you, relatively healthy, maybe you more healthy than me, we probably don't need to have anything other than just an emergency contact. Probably, a relative or what have you. But let's say you had a chronic illness and you've never had that discussion. I think most doctors, and we've actually talked with a lot of doctors, and they all agree that that's a conversation that people should have earlier on than when things hit the fan and you're real sick and you're about to go to the ICU. That's not the time to have those conversations. So that's basically the idea.
Yeah, Mark, let me jump in. Why couldn't that idea have been created in a normal iterative process that the market? There are tons of startups and apps and everything created all the time. Why do you think the hack gave birth to that idea when maybe the normal standard commercialization process wouldn't have?
I think it's because of the totally interdisciplinary team process. I think the big drivers here were that Sulin, who's awesome, and had a startup prior to the hackathon called myexitstrategy.co, and what her goal was to really normalize the discussion of end of life topics, and the issue that she was seeing was that it's again, really hard to have these discussions with people because people don't want to talk about it. No matter how normal you make it, it's just a difficult discussion. So how do you get that? What's the first step? So I think, I think it was the confluence of team members and their problems and what they brought in. And I think, as a clinician, when I'm at work and when I see these problems, my goal is at that time really to survive, to get through the day, and you make do with what you have, right? But this is a time. Hackathons are times when it's you can actually think about these problems and think of solutions, as opposed to one thing I used to say, because I'm an internal medicine physician by training prior to palliative care, is you really can't practice effective internal medicine or medicine at all without being able to complain real good. And I'm really good at that. But hackathons are a way to be able to come up with solutions for the things you complain about.
So, and Megan, I want to come back to you, and I want to ask this question. Now, you thought of the idea, it's created. Quickly summarize, just kind of close out the hack process for everybody.
Yeah.
What's the presentation like? How long is it? What happens? And how many you make? And how does it all go?
Sure. Well, actually, Mark and Sue Lin were the ones that did the presentation itself. It was three minutes of presenting the concept. You have a PowerPoint presentation. You have to just present the problem, what your solution is, what your product is. Like, some people did mock-ups, some people actually built out total apps. Like, the diet monitoring folks. Like, there was a team that was trying to address bulimia and anorexia with a better diet monitoring app, and they built out the front end of that app, and they presented it. So people could do all kinds of things, but you had to keep it tight, and then judges had 2 minutes to ask questions, and then it was on to the next team. So that's basically what it was, but since it was such a short presentation, you had to, Sue Lin and Mark rehearsed, we tried to make the presentation look nice.
Yeah, we actually had we had a deadline. And I think part of this was just from my experience from the previous hackathon. The pitch is so important. So I think the two values in hackathons are really the iterative process and meeting people outside of your silos. But then the second thing is really being able to work on pitching to an audience. And so for the day of the actual pitches, Sunday, we had a hard deadline of, I think it was either 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. where we were stopping with any kind of features or anything else design, and just focusing on making sure that the pitch was perfect. And I think that's, I think our idea is compelling, but also our pitch was good, and that matters, I think, in these hackathons.
Yeah, there were a lot of folks who just had good ideas, but didn't really present them so well, or had clearly created a 10-minute long presentation and just got caught up in the middle. So keeping it interesting and tight was very important.
Is there a type of person? Is there a hack type, or is this something that you think anybody from healthcare could come in and do, or are there people who would not fare well in a hack type process?
I think the people that do the best are people that work well in teams, I would say. So I think there's a room for personalities, but you also have to be able to let everyone's opinion come through and work with it.
So doctors don't do well at this.
You know what? I think also the doctors that go to these hackathons, I would say for the most part they're all like-minded, and I think they're great assets. And you know what? I think as a whole, a lot of medicine is becoming interdisciplinary, and certainly palliative care and internal medicine are very interdisciplinary teams. So we do this in our day jobs. It's just being able to translate what we do to this other kind of thing. Hackathons and kind of ideas. And there's a really big push, especially in the partner system, and at Brigham, for instance, with their innovation hub, to really get more clinicians thinking about how they can, be the drivers of change, because they're on, and it's not social workers, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, nurses. who see the problems that are in healthcare and can really make changes.
So, we've alluded to it in here, but the concept that you talked about, My Proxy, won the hackathon. It won actually 2 of the different awards at the hackathon. I got 2 questions, and so what's happened since the hack for My Proxy itself?
Yeah, so it's been we were super excited that we won first place in the primary care track, and we also won the Patient Shark Tank Award, which I'm thrilled about. Since then, our team from the hackathon, we've kept in touch, and we're working on this. We're actually as I talked about before, my partner Sue Lin, who was an integral part of the hackathon team, actually had a previous startup called myexitstrategy.co, and what we've done is we've actually merged My Proxy as the first offering of My Exit Strategy, which is a platform company that uses technology to make advanced care and end-of-life planning easier. So Sue Lin actually had applied to Mass Challenge before the hackathon with her startup My Exit Strategy, and actually went to the second round. So I joined the team and became the medical guy for My Exit Strategy, and we actually pitched for the second round of Mass Challenge about a week or 2 ago, and since then we actually just found out on Wednesday that we were finalists in Mass Challenge. So we're 2015 finalists for Mass Challenge, which is awesome. We're super excited about that. And we're going to use that time in the incubator and accelerator to really focus the idea and focus business strategies to make it successful and run pilots. The other thing we've been doing is we've been talking with a lot of interested parties at partners to try and figure out how we can get this into the system and where it makes sense and where we can run pilots. So it's a really exciting time for My Exit Strategy and My Proxy moving forward.
So let me ask this, and Megan, I'm going to say this. There aren't many companies. I mean, the odds are against any startup, so it's not fair to pick out the hack as it. But I mean, usually companies don't come out of the hack, right? They usually wind up, they don't last very long afterwards. I only know of a few, even off the top of my head, that I think have even existed for a little while outside of a hack. Why is that? Why don't more startups survive after being conceived of as a hack? Because essentially, you're having about 15 startups conceived right there.
I was thinking about that, and I don't have a definitive answer to this, of course. But I think maybe a contributing factor is that with healthcare hackathons, with any hackathon maybe, you've got ideas people, you've got the people who are in the field who are doing it, but it's not necessarily the folks that are the best at going in front of investors or just the entrepreneurial sort. I don't know. But I think, you could have a good concept, and it's very hard to actually get that funded. You have to know the right channels. You have to take the right approach. I think it's easy to basically generate like a very quick idea and then not know how to monetize it, is my guess. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, Megan, I think that's right. I mean, like I said, I actually won a previous hackathon. It was a MIT undergraduate hackathon with a group of guys. I call them the gentlemen, who were undergrads from MIT, Johns Hopkins, and Brown. And we came up with this stethoscope accessory idea, won first place, and we tried to, work on this as a potential startup, and had some talks, tried to go for patent. But I think the issue is that at least for that project, the special sauce was kind of wrong. There wasn't a business person. There wasn't someone that was kind of ensconced in the startup field that really knew the connections that what Megan is saying. So it was the connections we had amongst the 4 of us, and what I could leverage from my fellowship and the people that I knew at Harvard, which was great. And I think we got further than we could have. We got to like patent status, but it's really hard when you don't know. You don't know where to go, and you don't know who to talk to. I will say though that MIT Grand Hack is still fairly new, and I think as far as I know, this is actually the second year that they've hosted it. And the first year, or maybe it's the third, I don't, it's fairly new. But I believe one of the winners was this company called PillPack, and they actually came from and they're doing pretty good. So N is low, but the hitting average is pretty good so far. So
yeah, and I mean, how long does it take for a startup to be defined as a successful startup? But certainly more than a year usually, So who knows? Maybe a couple more from last year will emerge out of the weeds. We don't know that quite yet because it is a fairly new concept. I have some faith in our core team for my proxy though. So.
Well, and it's you're right. I think that PillPack is probably the shining example of a great idea thought of from a hack. So, but also I guess from what I hear, and we'll wrap this up, is it would be great to see that same philosophy of the hack actually matriculate through pharma, through medical device, through some traditional health IT companies where they go and they seek out some of these disparate people to bring them together. When we talk about the patient voice not being enough in healthcare, what I'm hearing from you is that there isn't just this kind of unified voice of the entire ecosystem of healthcare getting together when the opportunity to solve some of the big problems are just sitting right there. It's the silos still kind of kill us.
I think that's right. I think that's right. And the silos are things that it's so hard because everyone's just trying to swimming to survive. I think everyone wants to be more collaborative in the healthcare field, and there are all these great initiatives to do that. And I think it's just a matter of time before more people realize that there are these avenues to go towards. It's an exciting time.
Well, I want to thank both of you for talking in depth about this issue. It's, again, one of the important ones when we talk about innovation. Typically, we wrap up MedHeads talking also not only about a key issue, which we've done, but talk about some of the important news that we thought was interesting this week. Mark, again, when the Smithsonian plays MedHeads on a continuous loop, you will be there as the first guest ever. So we'll let you go and ask you, looking back at the week, what news caught your eye when it came to the business of innovation in healthcare?
Yeah, so actually, this is really interesting. So I actually did a health policies elective during my fellowship, and we actually went to the Hill to talk with representatives and also industry folks, and they were actually talking about the 21st Century Cures Bill. So it was really interesting to see on MedCity that it had advanced. So I thought that was kind of huge, and I'll be really interested to see what the repercussions and what actually happens if it continues to advance.
No, I think it's a critical issue. I mean, it's interesting as it hits the full Congress, what changes, and you always hear more debate when it wraps up, but there's been so much praise. Bio sent out a press release today cheering its arrival out of committee, and that should be really interesting. For me, I hope that people go back and they read some of MedCity's coverage of the patient experience summit at Cleveland Clinic this past week. There are only a handful of patient-forward conversations that happen. The Patient Experience Summit, our own MedCity Engage conference. I think that tangentially you can talk about David Nash's Pop Health Conference in Philly. But it's impressive to see the conversations that took place there, really trying to focus an increasingly large part of the healthcare institution on patient experience. And now you're seeing best practices emerge, which is interesting. One of the leads in healthcare at Twitter attended. You had multi-country attendees who are writing about what they need as patients. Everything on mobile apps to real patient communications took place, and it's an amazing conference annually. I moderated, so I'm a little jealous. I'm a little biased, but I think it's a great conference. Meghana, what hard-hitting story did you think was great this week?
Oh, I love the tone in your voice right there. Knowing what's coming next. I went to the American Urological Association meeting this year because my fiance is a urologist, and I have to say I've been to countless healthcare conferences now at this point, And the floor for this one, the exhibition hall, was the best I've ever seen. Like, I got to do robotic surgery, simulated, of course. I got to walk around. My fiance every year takes a picture of himself with the same, like, mannequin that is in a very compromising position. It's pretty hilarious. And my favorite swag that I got was a pair of boxers called Vasectopees, which have these little gel beads that you can put in the freezer and then tuck into a pocket of the boxer shorts, so that when you've had a vasectomy or any scrotal procedure, really, because I surveyed a whole bunch of
scrotal procedure. Good.
This has use, so you can, like, instead of just like sitting down holding a bag of peas to yourself, you can walk around in a pair of boxers that allows life to be a little more comfortable. So vasectomies are kind of cool. But it was a very interesting conference. I certainly learned a whole lot about surgery at it, and yeah.
Where are they?
They're based in Chicago.
No, you said you brought home the swag. Where are the vasectomies?
I don't know, actually. They might be rounding in the Veterans Hospital right now. I don't.
Off-label use? Are you talking about off-label use?
He said that sometimes it gets a little hot, so.
Oh, no. Well, you know, I have to say, right, I mean, urologists have a lot to learn. I probably am the only one of the three who's had said procedure that would require the P's, TMI, right? But I will just tell you that urologists need to work on bedside manner. They have to work on bedside manner. Because this guy came up to me and he says, he wanted to make me feel calm. He goes, I just want to tell you, I came this close, I'm going to come this close, I just want to tell you that I've done 230 of these procedures and I've never made a mistake. Now, this doctor knows nothing about math, because immediately what I say to him is, Doc, that makes me really nervous. He's like, what do you mean that makes you nervous? I said, well, Doc, I said, look, sooner or later everyone makes a mistake, so the odds are increasing that your mistake is next. Man, he did not appreciate that mathematical insight. I mean, I guess, you know, I mean, anybody, once the mistake comes in a procedure like that, Mark, they go immediately to palliative care, right? I mean, that's the process.
But now I have a treatment, and it sounds like it's peas related.
Vasectomies are part of a whole line, though. They have peas for all body parts, so.
How this wasn't started at a hack, I don't know.
We live in the future. We live in the future.
Well, you know, I think, you know, I want to thank all of you for your great insight. I love anytime we can get frozen peas into a MedHeads broadcast. It's going to be a positive one. But I also really appreciate the conversation that we've had here. We're going to have more guests like Mark coming to MedHeads as we continue to talk about some of the big issues in healthcare. But for Mark Zhang and for Megan Akeshiman, I'm Chris Sepper. Thank you again for having this time on MedHeads.